Alright, so now that we've taken some time to smooth out the topology of our head, what we want to do next is to subdivide the mesh so that we can have more geometry to push and pull points into the landmarks of our face and our head. So what I've done is I've duplicated this low poly mesh, and we're going to subdivide this here in a minute, but I'm using this strategy of duplicating what our previous step was, so that if should we want to come back to it, we'll have that model, that geometry layer built into the same file. It's just sort of a fail-safe. Should we get in here and make some different choices, we want to go back. So I want to encourage you to do that. Before we make the topology, or we increase the topology by subdividing, I want to make a couple of edits to the model. So you can see around the eyelids, we've got the geometry that's sort of penetrating the eyeball. I want to pull that forward, and I also want to create a split in the mouth right between the lips. So let's hide the eyes for now. We're working in symmetry, so I'm just going to select those lids. I'm going to bring my eyes back. I'm going to hide the selection. I'm going to use the push tool. I'm just going to right click and pull that forward just a little bit, just so that it's proud of the surface. All right, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to come down here to the lips. Let me bring my selections back so we can see it. I'm just going to bevel this in. So hit B for bevel, pull that in. Just like that. And now what I want to do next is I'm going to slide these close to the middle. Alright, so we have our lines, our edges selected. I'm going to right click on that, go to slide. I'm just going to pull that up towards that crease. Alright, I'm going to do the same for the top lip. Slide. Notice I have preserved curvature, which is going to help a little bit. Okay, and then we're going to select those polys and then just hit delete. Now we have a nice clean loop hole right there. Alright, so we're going to pull that back into the mouth, and that's going to set us up to do the mouth cavity. So hit Z, and then right click, and then with a selection action center, just going to pull that back just about there, just to give myself a little bit of space to work with. Alright. Because we've established that loop, we can select two polygons, hit L, and now we have that interior loop selected. Okay, that's going to be important when we reach our next stage, which is the subdivision stage. And so let's go ahead and do that. So just hit D on the keyboard, and we subdivide the mesh. You can see instantly we've got a lot more geometry to work with. And because we've taken some time in our previous stage to even out or just sort of smooth out the topology around the head, we have not only increased the number of polygons, they're all very clean. So if we select a loop and move up and down with the left and right arrow keys, we can see that we've got nice clean topology all the way around. Okay, and that's a good thing. So what we want to do next, I'm fairly happy with the way that mouth looks right now, and I don't want to disrupt that as I start to start pushing points around. So I'm just going to select those two, hit L, and then shift up arrow, and I'm just going to lock those. Actually, I might go back one. So I just want that interior. So do that, and then I'll hit J on the keyboard, and that's going to lock those polygons. So it doesn't matter what I push and pull out here, those are going to remain locked. Okay, so that's sometimes helpful when you're pushing points around in a tough or tight area like that, just to lock things or to hide things, so that later on you won't disrupt anything the work that you've already established. All right, so I'm going to go to a different view. I'm going to bring back my transparent material, and now we're going to go about the task of pushing and pulling these points together to get the nice topology around these landmarks that we see in our drawing. We've lost a little bit of volume, as to be expected when you subdivide something. It's going to make it a little softer, but we can get that back pretty easily using the Sculpt tools. I'm just going to go through that process right now. Actually, what I might want to do first is to establish that nostril, where that nostril is going to be. And I think that's probably a good place to start. Something like that. I'm just going to bevel that in. So hit B for bevel. Pull that in slightly. Shift click reactivates the tool. Something like that. Now I'm just going to smooth that out. So I'm going to go Shift up arrow to grow the selection slightly, and then Shift S. I'm just going to hit that smooth just a little bit, just to soften that harsh bevel. Alright, so when you subdivide, you can see that it's not fully resolved, but at least we know where it's going to be. We can push that to, we have at least some place to work with. We know with the location of those nostrils. They're not going to stay there, but they're pretty close to where we want. Alright, so now let's move into the actual pushing and pulling of points. And this is really a creative process where we have to make some decisions about where the eyelids fall. We'll probably add a loop or two in here to establish a little bit more of a crease where the eyelid wraps around the eye and hits the forehead or the brow right here. So take a little time to do that. And I'm going to show you a little bit of that right now. Let's go to a little bit closer view. We'll grab our Sculpt tools. Again, we're working in symmetry, and we just want to go through, and you can see that as I work here, I'm just going to be working in really small increments of movement, just to push and pull. We want to pay attention to the drawings and use those as a guide. And what I like to do is to sort of jump around. So I'll tighten an area up, say like around the lips just a little bit. And then I'll jump over to another section. Then I'll come back to the section I was working on previous. And I find that by jumping around like that, it allows your brain to sort of focus more creatively on the task at hand. So you're not so you just sort of come back to the area that you've been working on and with a little bit more of a fresher view, if that makes sense. You can see I'm not exactly sticking to the reference drawings, but I'm trying to keep the spirit of those drawings in place. All right, and I will periodically jump back and forth between this raw polys and the subdivision, the sub-D mode. The raw polygons really reveal what those polygons are doing, and in trouble areas they'll help you to better identify what's a hill and what's a valley. You can space things more evenly than you can with a subdivided mesh. So I can come back in here and tighten that up. I'll show you another tool that I like to use when at this stage. That's the pinch tool. The pinch tool is great because it works on hills and valleys. So I can come back in here and really just sort of tighten things up. Now notice I'm still not getting things super tight. You want to work towards it. You don't want things to be, the geometry to be too close, too quickly. So when we subdivide, you can see that it's really coming together and helping us to define and sharpen up a lot of these areas. We're not fighting the topology at this stage. It's helping us. We're working with it. All right, and then we'll use the inflate tool periodically to just reestablish a little bit of volume and smoothness. So I'll use the inflate and then I'll smooth it back. That looks a little bit too tight right there, so I can totally change that up and move stuff around. We're going to go about this process for all the landmarks around the face, especially around the edges of the mouth, where we're going to have a lot more attention. We need a lot more attention. Just taking note, trying to get a different. Notice I'll move a little bit. I'll sculpt a little bit. Then I'll move my camera a little bit, just so I can get a better view, a better perspective of what I'm working on. I really want to encourage you to do that. If you work from just an isometric view, or you just stay in one particular vantage point of your model, it can sometimes be deceiving. You'll be pushing and pulling points, and it might be in the wrong direction. Okay, so now you can see, let me just turn on our clay material. There we go. You can see we're starting to establish a nice bit of detail in the lips. Let me just refine that just a little bit more. So if I toggle off the wireframe, you can see we have a nice bit of topology, and you can see that nice little bit of light that's catching it. Okay, and we're going to work to refine that a little bit more. We want to be careful not to areas down here. We want to smooth that out a little bit, but you can see how nicely Modo handles that. Just hit the S key or the Shift key with any of the tools, any of the sculpting tools, and it will help you to smooth that out. Alright, now what I'm going to continue to do is to work around. I'm going to define the nose, then we're going to work on the eyelids a little bit, and then we'll also refine the ear. And you can see I'm using my drawings, my isometric drawings, to just sort of get me in the ballpark of where these forms need to be so that I can tweak them into place. The transparent material that we're using is also very accommodating for that process. It allows us to see through our mesh, obviously, so that we can really see what we're doing. I'm going to grab the pinch tool, and this is an area that I really want to pull together. Notice that the pinch, when I resize it, what I want to do, I want to affect this area right here. So I'm making that pinch, I'm resizing by right-clicking, and just dragging to the left or to the right. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger than what I need, so it'll grab those points. And you can see how nicely it just tightens things up. Okay, again, you don't want to get too tight. This is probably not the cleanest spot right there, so I'm just going to smooth that out a little bit. And this is when raw polygon is pretty helpful. You can just sort of come in here and see what it is you've got, and make this a little cleaner. And balance that out a little bit. So when you subdivide, you give a really nice clean shape right there. So you can see what we've got. And that's a pretty good shape, you know? And it's relatively low polygon. Still, you know, we could go tighter with more topology, but you know, we've got the topology in a really good spot. Alright, just sort of working your way around. Again, sort of, we're going to de-emphasize the nostrils. Those are not going to be very deep. But we do want them to be more or less accurate. So we're going to round that out, those shapes out a little bit. And you can see when we've subdivided, we need to reestablish some sharpness in her features. Okay, so we can do that really easily, and you can see it's just a couple of pulls in the right direction, and we've got her silhouette back. Now I want it to bring, that was like the point, but let me just bring up go out to the side a little bit on her nose. Okay, we still have the silhouette, but we've pulled the geometry out just off center, left and right, to establish a good bit of volume, just in the right spots. Okay, so I'm fairly happy with that right now, and I'll probably go back and tweak that a little bit more. Let's work on the eyelids next. I'm going to push and pull those a little bit more than what we have. Alright, so I'm going to turn my transparent material off. I'm just going to maximize this viewport. Actually, let me go back and we'll take a look at the eyelids. Over here, I want to make sure that my selections are being shown. So if you hit the O key, you're going to have a dialog box that come up, and you can decide what you want on, what you want off. So that's all I did there. But I want to see generally that this is where the area that I need to work. Okay, so it's about the third span, between the third and the fourth span. Alright, so I'm going to go to raw polygon mode, and what I want to do is to create a loop slice between right here. So a couple of polygons in the same direction, and Alt-C, click and drag, and I'm going to get that fairly close to about right there, and then I'm going to just keep that selected, then use the move tool. I'm just going to pull that down. This is going to, actually I think that's probably a little bit high, so we might want to do our loop slice one above. Alright, so Alt-C, pull that down like that. With that selected, I'm going to take that out completely. I'm just going to go ahead and pull that down. We'll establish the big form first, and then we'll come back and tighten it up with an edge loop. How about that? You can see it's not exactly a perfect match with my drawing, but that's alright. We want to be more sensitive to our 3D than our drawing at this stage. I just want to create a valley. It's a little bit more intentional than what we had before. I can exaggerate that a little bit, because when it's subdivided, it's going to lose a little bit of volume. It's going to be smoothed out, which is a good thing, but we want to anticipate that, so you can exaggerate just a touch, and that'll set us up nicely. Alright, I think that's fairly good for what we need right now. Okay, we've established that a little bit better. Let's just get this in line. Select those and hit the up arrow key to continue that selection all the way around. And again, using the move tool, you can just smooth that down a little bit. And you can, these are just really fine-tuned touches. Okay, this doesn't take much at this point. Again, because we've worked really hard at the earlier stages of topology to help define our structure. Okay, so that's done. You can see that now that this is more accommodating for that turn of the, where the eyelid wraps around that. Actually, this one I want to pull forward a little bit more. So we'll just make that, bring that out. Let's get a good vantage point. Again, just sort of establishing some volume, bringing some of that back. All right, that looks pretty good. Now let's go ahead and tighten this up with an edge loop. So Alt-C, and we'll just bring that sort of close right there. So when you subdivide, you can see as the light catches it right there. It's a pretty good addition. Okay, and that's going to have some nice. It's going to be nice to have that when we go to texture the model, because it's going to catch the light and it'll also be a nice shadow. It's clean geometry. All right, we need to even this out down here because we don't want that same loop. Just grow that selection. We don't want that same loop tight down here in the cheek. That doesn't make any sense for this model. So we'll just come up to about there. Just right click and slide. Just going to slide that a little closer. Again with preserve curvature. And just going to split the difference between these polygons right here. Alright. Just so that whole loop selected, grab the move tool and we'll just smooth this out. Okay, we're not smoothing anything except what's selected, and I find this to be a really forgiving way to work. You're not worrying about what's happening over here because everything is sort of contained within that selection. It makes it nice and clean, easy to work with. We've got a little bit tighter geometry up there, and that's good. What I want to do next, let's see where that loop is. I want to create another little band just to define this edge right here. I'm going to add a little bit of thickness to there. So Alt-C again. Just going to bring this down. Something like that. Pretty tight, but again, not all the way to the edge. Okay, so let's do this. We'll just zoom in pretty tight here. I want to pull that little lip down. So I'm just going to select a couple of edges and then shift up arrow to about there. Okay, and then I'm just going to move that down and in just a little bit. Something like that. So when we subdivide, you can see that little bit of a curve right there, and that's a really small thing, but that's what we're working on. We're working on the small things right now. We're sort of refining that a bit. All right, so this is a valley. I want to, let's see, let's go with what we know. We'll go ahead and add a little bit of topology, just like we did with the upper lid. Let's add a little bit more detail in the lower lid. I just want to pull that in slightly, just a touch, and then we're going to loop slice this. So Alt-C, bring that up, and two edges along that loop, and then just grow that with the up arrow and zoom in pretty tight, and then hit the push tool, pull that out a little further, just like that, and we have a nice rounded edge. Okay, so it depends on how tight the shot is. You may or may not need to have that detail, but I like to do that. Now you can see that we've got a little bit of a discrepancy here. This looks a little weird Don't worry about that right now. We can refine that. We're going to get the eyelashes in there. We'll refine the landmarks of the face a little bit more, add the eyebrows, and then complete the ear. And that'll be the end of the final face topology. Alright, so now that we're happy with the editing that we've done on our higher topology, we've tightened up some nice areas around the mouth, around the nose, and the eyes. We've worked on the ear to establish the silhouette. I want to point out a couple of things to you before we get to the eyebrows and the eyelashes, is that our reference drawings are helpful, and they give us a lot of information, but really we need to look at our 3D model in the 3D view just to see if our 2D choices here are working in the 3D space. And specifically around the eyelid, I want to bring your attention to. You can see that her eyelashes in the drawing come up a little bit higher than they do in the actual model. Well, I felt like pulling that eyelid up to match that 2D drawing revealed a little bit too much of her eye and made her look a little bug-eyed, okay, which is not desirable. So what I wanted to do is just pull that back down like I have. To me, that looks pretty good. Okay, her eyes look a little sleepy right now, but that's all right. It's a little bit more of a neutral pose than we have in our reference drawing, and that's all right. It's good to have a little bit of extra room so that we can go down, we can close her eyelid or open her eyelid should we need to. So this is good enough for us to work with and move forward. I just wanted to point this out to you, that sometimes you'll get reference that works in the 2D, but it just won't work in the 3D. So you sort of have to make those decisions as you go along. Adding a little bit more detail to our face, we want to add the eyebrows and then the eyelashes. Now when I get to the texturing part of the project, I want to apply a stencil map to these polygons in the eyebrow, and that's going to help me to define the silhouette of the hairs. We're not going to use hair, we're going to use artwork to help us get that look of hair, okay, and that's going to be a lot more evident and obvious when we get to that part. But to set that up, we need just polygons that we're going to use to map our texture onto. So we can use the topology from the model to accomplish that. So I'm going to select the polygons that I feel like work best here. So I'm just going to select that from our head mesh. I'm going to copy that, hit new, and then paste it. We can hide our head mesh so that this is right from the model. It's the exact topology from our head. And what I want to do next is to run a loop slice along the length here. Alright, so Alt-C, and I'm going to go with a count of 3, and this is going to be in symmetry mode. And what's going to help me with symmetry, I'm going to turn this preserve curvature off because I just want that to be a clean shape. So in symmetry, I get one right down the middle, and then I get to control left or right on either side, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. Okay, so we subdivide that, you can see that it holds that shape, that edge a little bit stronger. Alright, I'm going to do the same here, except I'm going to go with just one. I just want one loop slice around there, and then one on this side. Alright, so hit D, or hit the Shift key to subdivide, and you can see that we've got clean topology for the start of our eyebrow. I want to grab this one. I'm going to hit the push tool. I'm going to push this out, so right click, just push that out a little bit. Grab this one and grab that one, so double clicking those, push, and pull that out too. Alright, so what I'm trying to do is to create a little bit of an arc to simulate the volume that you would have in an eyebrow. Okay, notice we don't have any back topology, we don't need it. And that's good enough for the eyebrow. Alright, let's move on to the eyelashes next. So just like we did with the eyebrows, we're going to use the topology on the head mesh to create the eyelashes themselves. So let me maximize my viewport. I'm going to hide the geometry layers that I don't need. So with the head layer selected, let me zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to just paint select that upper row. You can work in symmetry if you'd like. Sometimes I just like to keep it simple and work on one side and then mirror that over. So I've got that upper lid selected. Now this is going to be where her makeup, her eyeliner is going to be. So I want to keep those. So I'm going to copy those, hit in for new mesh layer, then I'm going to paste it into that layer. I'm going to hide the geometry that I don't need right now. Just going to select those edges and then up arrow till I get the entire bottom row. I'm going to bring my visibility of my geometry layer back of the head. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to pull out a row of polygons, and I want to make a little taper. So I want the inside to be a little bit smaller than the outside. And that's just sort of a personal preference of mine. So what I'm going to do, we're going to achieve that with a fall off. So I'm going to go to top view, and they're going to hit Alt spacebar to get access to my fall offs. Just click and drag that over. And then what we're going to do is hit Z on our keyboard, and that's going to be our edge extend tool. And click in the viewport. We're going to extend this out. Okay, so you can see what the fall off is doing for us. It's doing exactly what we want. We want a little bit more taper on the inside than the outside. So let me just pull that over a little bit. And that fall off is live, so I can pull that over if I want, just to get the right shape that I'm looking for. Alright, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to hit Escape to clear the fall off. What I want to do next to create a curve, just so these eyelashes will have a nice curve in here, is to add a loop slice. So Alt C, click in here, double click on that edge, and then we're just going to pull this down to create a nice curvature. And that's a little heavy right there, a little bit too much. Just something gentle like that, just sort of a nice little curve, and that's going to be good enough. Now I also want to tighten up, just hide the other geometry. I want to tighten up this edge right here, so it's going to stick more or less to that eyelid. So Alt C, another loop slice. I'm going to turn off preserve curvature. I'm going to do the same thing up here. Another loop slice. So when I subdivide, you can see that we have a nice crease along that valley. Let me bring back my other geometry so you can see that's a nice shape. It's good enough for us to work with. Alright, let's move on to the lower lid now. Same sort of thing. We're going to select the polygons along the base, not all the way to the end. Copy, in for new mesh layer, and then paste. Hide our other geometry. Select that upper row. Bring our geometry back so we can see it. And we'll use a fall off for this too. So front view. And just drag this out. Something like that. Z on the keyboard for edge extend. And then click in the viewport and just pull that down. We have a nice little bevel, a nice little taper. And I also want to scale that a little bit, just a little bit of a flare. Alright, that looks good. Let me hit Escape to clear the fall off. I'm going to hit F just so that we can see, to flip to polygon, so we can see the geometry a little bit better from this vantage point. And I want to curve this too, so I'll run a loop slice around there. And I want to select this outer edge, grow that selection, and then W for the move tool, and just move that down. So we have a nice little curve right there. Alright, let's tighten that geometry up with a couple of loop slices. So hide our geometry and Alt C, along there, Alt-C, along there. So when we subdivide, you can see we've got it really stuck to that eye. Alright, I'm going to cut that geometry and paste it all in one layer. And I'm going to mirror that over, so Shift V, and mirror it over. Alright, so the idea with these eyelashes is that it's going to be a single polygon layer. So it's just going to be single, so there's going to be no thickness to it. When we get to the texturing part of the course, what we're going to do is to apply an image map, which is going to define the individual lashes. So all that we need at this point is just clean topology to work with. Really sets us up nicely for our eyelashes.